When you think of Colombia, most people usually think of Pablo Escobar, cocaine, cartels, and sometimes positive things like salsa. But most of the time, it's usually negative things. I remember the first time I told my family and friends in the United States that I was going to Colombia, and everyone looked at me with some degree of a worrying look. But I didn't listen to them, and I'm glad that I did not. Now this is my third time back here in Colombia, and in this video I'm gonna try to convince you that Colombia is actually one of the happiest places on earth. And to do that, I'll be taking you to the so-called murder capital of the world. And there is some truth to the stereotype of Colombia as a dangerous and violent place. Colombia's history is marked by a tumultuous past, including prolonged wars and the rise of drug cartels. But despite these challenges, Colombia has experienced a remarkable transformation in recent years. And Communa 13, a neighborhood in Medellin, is a great example of that transformation. Communa 13 once bore a notorious reputation as a hotbed of violence and drug-related issues. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the neighborhood faced the devastating consequence of being entrenched in activities of the Medellin cartel, led by Pablo Escobar. This resulted in high crime rates, poverty, and limited access to essential services for the residents.
When I was young, it was hard to grow here because before this place was very dangerous. When I was a child, I cannot play here more like 20, 30 minutes because all the time that gangsters coming and start to shooting because they fight for the territories. And if we saw that guys, we must run. Here around to this place, I lose some friends. We grew with maybe 300-400 guys, but just 40 guys, we survived that violence because my family was very poor, and in that time, thanks for the violence the gangsters they have here, our parents, they cannot find jobs easy. And many times the gangsters say to the kids, the young guys, work with us. Yeah, with us you can make money. Our parents, they can make in 2 months. We can make it in 1 week. Many times they try to recruit me, but many times I say no because I saw when my friends, they start to working with the gangsters. Yeah, on the first times was funny. Yeah, they feel powerful because they have guns, they are making money. In that life, if you are selling drugs and you lose money, the crew can kill you. And if the crew wants to kill you and you escape, the crew kill your family.
Wait, why? Why does it seem to be that cartels and violent groups exist much more in some places than others? I will sketch out some basics that can help answer this question. 1. Optimizing circumstances. At its core, the emergence of cartels and violent groups can be seen as a manifestation of a group seeking to optimize their circumstances. And cartels, which are traditionally associated with maintaining high prices in markets, often adapt their economic concept to the realm of illegal activities. 2. Anti-social markets. A defining characteristic of cartels is their involvement in anti-social markets that operate in direct conflict with social norms and values. And as a result, governments view these groups as a significant threat to public safety, national security, and a force that hinders economic and social prosperity. 3. Socio-economic context. The prevalence of cartels and violence groups cannot be isolated from the broader socio-economic context of the regions in which they arise from. Factors such as income inequality, poverty, lack of economic opportunities, and weak governance can create fertile ground for the growth and sustenance of criminal organizations.
My name is Juan Vargas. I'm a professor of economics at Universidad del Rosario in Bogotá, Colombia. My main field of research is the economics of violence and the economics of crime. How come is Colombia a country that is very democratic by international standards, if you look at the last 200 years, but also very violent. You would think a priori that democracy and violence are negatively related, in the sense that if you can channel the opposition preferences via democracy, elections, and so on and so forth, there are less incentives to resort to political violence. But one of the reasons that this happens is that in Colombia, democratic arrangements in a context of very weak institutions and a lot of lack of state capacity are not enough because end up being captured by political and economic elites for their own interests, so end up being very exclusionary.
4. Monopoly on violence. This is an extremely crucial point. Governments across the world prescribe to this notion that their legitimacy is predicated on their monopoly of legitimate violence. This was a concept popularized by Max Weber, the famous sociologist and political theorist. According to him, the state is a human community that claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. In other words, the state possesses the sole authority to exercise violence or force within its boundaries in order to maintain the law and order that protects its citizens. And when countries experience a breakdown in the legitimacy of the state's use of violence, it can lead to a power vacuum or weakened governance. And in such circumstances, non-state actors such as cartels may emerge to fill the void and take advantage of the situation. Officials in Medellin saw that in order to gain control back of Communa 13, they had to enforce their monopoly of legitimate violence. Insert Orion Operation. Orion Operation was the Colombian government's effort to take back Communa 13 and regain its monopoly on legitimate violence by any means necessary. The operation involved hundreds, if not thousands, of military forces, tanks, and even American support.
I remember on that operation, I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I'm survivor of that operation. The government history was on that operation. They killed around 2,000 guerrillas, and they say they captured 370 guerrillas. But the history was different. The real history was thousands guerrillas. They escaped, and after the operation, the government started to come in on the civilians' houses, and they found they killed many innocent people. And they started taking that bodies. They disappeared some bodies, and another bodies they changed their clothes, and they started to call them guerrillas.
The operation was criticized for its heavy-handed use, to say none the least. After the end of the operation, which the government hailed as a huge success, the community of Communa 13 was devastated. Hundreds, if not thousands of people, innocent people, gone missing to never be found again.
We understand Orion operation was needed for save this community, but we don't know it why the government killed so many innocent people.
Can you comment a little bit about this relationship about a government's monopoly on legitimate power and how a lack of that can actually lead to cartels and other, paramilitary groups to succeed in place of them?
I mean, that's a very interesting question, also very complex, very difficult to answer. State capacity and the monopoly of violence is very important, so it's necessary but not sufficient. You could have a relatively absent state, you could have rebel governance that is enough to prevent violence from happening. I mean, this is very much what's happening in Medellin right now, in particular in the communities that you have visited. One of the reasons why violence has decreased so much in the last years in Medellin, it's because it's not the absence of armed groups and gangs. Part of the reason is that there is this gang peace. And the reason there is this gang peace is that these gangs organize themselves into bigger cartels that are called razones. The cartels themselves collude and coordinate their activities through a head that is called la oficina. state capacity is definitely whenever it's necessary, it's not enough, in the sense that you not only you need sort of the monopoly of violence, but also you need sort of a strong set of institutions in order for there to be checks and balances, because when you have the monopoly of violence, you could misuse the monopoly of violence. And let me give you an example. And it's based on this false positives scandal that there was in Colombia. It became clear that the military was given incentives to perform better against the guerrillas. Incentives in terms of sort of promotions for higher rank commanders, vacation, and even money. What they ended up doing is that they ended up finding civilians, killing the civilians, and portraying the civilians as guerrilla members killed in combat. Some accounts say that there were over 6,000 civilians that they were killed by the Colombian military because of the incentives given by the government. When you seek to control the monopoly of violence, and so you give a lot of incentives, high power incentives to the military to sort of obtain that monopoly of violence, but there are no checks and balances. There's a weak judiciary that is not overseeing what the military is doing, and the military has its own sort of courts that cannot go to civilian courts and all that. That backfire in terms of security of civilians.
When you look at some of the most economically unequal places in the world, Colombia is right up there. With that, can you talk a little bit about the role of economic inequalities in shaping the pattern of violence, within different regions in Colombia?
I think the key point is that economic inequality comes often hand in hand with political inequality. And it is political inequality where it's really a strong determinant of political violence, right? If you have no way of sort of channeling your worries, your demands, your grievances through the political process, you don't have voice in the political arena, that makes very likely that you resort to means that might be violent.
The introduction of public transportation and cable cars and escalators is a huge part of this effort by the Colombian government in order to increase economic activity for the people of Communa 13. And these projects were not only important because they increased mobility, but because it increased Communa 13 members' access to education, social programs, and other economic opportunities in order to escape the vicious cycle of poverty. And Communa 13 today is not recognizable whatsoever. Millions of tourists every single year come here in order to witness the amazing music, art, and overall transformation that the community has made. And Communa 13's transformation from a place of fear and violence to a place of art, music, and popular tourist destination serves as an inspiration for all communities across the world. But the road that it must take is not always easy.